Hello everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Housing and Regeneration Scrutiny Commission here in the London Borough of Newham. This evening's meeting is being held in person at East End Town Hall. I would like to welcome all members and officers, the public and the press to this meeting, whether they are watching via YouTube or attending in person. Concerning the agenda for this evening, I intend to take the items as per the order. This will allow members and officers to consider and contribute to discussions. I am anticipating that the meeting is likely to run until 9 p.m. this evening. With regard to meeting etiquette, I shall invite all participating in the meeting to introduce themselves, clearly stating their name and title when they speak for the first time. And this will be helpful for those listening at home and for the recording. And I've actually broken the cardinal rule. I want to introduce myself. I'm Councillor Lester Hudson, and I am chair of this Overview Scrutiny. Members of the council present in the chamber, please can I ask that you indicate that you wish to speak by raising your physical hand. The same applies to our officers and guests. This meeting of the Housing and Regeneration Scrutiny Commission is now called to order. I welcome everyone to this meeting on the 9th of September 2025. And as this is the first meeting of the municipal year for the Scrutiny Commission, I take this opportunity to welcome both new members of Scrutiny Commission as well as returning members. I note that due to strike action affecting Transport for London and including Tube and DLR, officers who are reliant on these forms of transport will be attending remotely using Zoom. Agenda item 2 concerns membership, including apologies and absence and notices of substitution. Are there any apologies for the absence of members of the Housing and Regeneration Scrutiny Commission?
Thank you, Councillor Hudson. Artemis Cassie, Head of Scrutiny and Governance at Newham. Councillor Rachel Tripp and Councillor Beckles have a meeting clash with the Strategic Development Committee. Councillors Allen, Bailey, Keeling and Vaughan are not attending in person and have sent apologies due to illness, but Councillors Bailey and Keeling are joining us online. Councillor Patel has sent apologies due to a community meeting, and we've had a notice of substitution. Councillor Susan Masters will be substituting for Councillor Vaughan at this meeting, and I think that covers everybody.
And I think the apologies for Councillor Islam and Councillor Hussain for lateness.
Thank you. On that note, Councillor Hudson, we're not yet quorate.
I'll note that. Item 3, declarations of interest. Declarations of interest are published in the Newham Council website from an abundance of caution and in the interest of transparency. Are there any declarations of interest from the members of the Commission for any item this evening?
None, Chair.
I've got none either. Item 4, minutes. The next item is to agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of May 2025.
So you're not yet quorate.
We can't agree the minutes.
No.
Okay, we get those retrospectively agreed once we are quorate. Item 5, work programme. Members to review and agree the Housing Regeneration and Scrutiny work programme for 25-26.
Yeah, in principle, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. The key thing for the next meeting is that we'll be looking at temporary accommodations. That will be a very useful scrutiny meeting. Right, item number 6, repairs and maintenance service. This report outlines the current position regarding work in progress, including overdue and out of target repairs, and additionally provides details of any backlog identified during the inspection of the Regulator of Social Housing, RSH. The report also highlights how Newham Council is making good progress since previous updates. That was in March 2024 and May 2025. I thank the officers for the report, and in the interest of time, I'm taking that the papers are as read in order to maximise the time for questions from members. Before going any further, I would like to invite Councillor Boswell-Young or Paul Kitson or David Padfield to give a brief introductory or contextualising comments. I ask you to keep these to no more than 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I will start, but then I will bring in other colleagues. Paul and David are here, and other officer colleagues are joining us online. Chair, I really want to bring this report to you today. This follows the updates that this committee had in, as you say, March 2004 and indeed in May 2005. And I think you'll agree from the reading that that the service is making some significant progress in relation to tackling repairs. This, you'll be aware of the context and of the C4 grading that the council received from the regulator in October 2024. The work to improve repairs predates that and has been going on since the time of the inspection in May 24. But yeah, I think we're making some really important progress in this area. The report is really doing a number of different things. So partly to outline what that progress looks like. Partly it's really around the kind of preparation work for AWAB's law, which comes into force later in October. And the work that the council is doing in readiness for that legislation coming in. And it also updates the panel on the work of the Repairs Contact Centre, which I think is a really important area of work. We are still experiencing a number of challenges there, but have a number of things in place to be able to support that. But happy to bring in other colleagues at this.
Before you go, Councillor Issam, there's a copy of the papers on the table if you wish to have a copy of a hard copy rather than looking at the computer screen, because it's often easier to look at papers rather than just look at the computer screen. Whether that interruption.
So David Padfield, Interim Director of Housing Services. I think Councillor Young's provided quite a comprehensive description there of what's set out in the report. The other things that I would emphasise are the performance figures that we've included in the report, both around the transactional performance that we do, the time we do a repair, and that shows that there has been an uptick in many of those measures. Some of them aren't quite at target yet, but most of them are either at target or not too far off. And the other set of performance figures that set out here are our TSM figures. And sorry, I must apologise to the Commission. In the table in 4.7, the years are labelled the wrong way around.
Yes. So
actually that's showing an improvement, not a deterioration, which hopefully was apparent when you read the report. So that is showing some significant improvements in some areas, including satisfaction with the council as a landlord. The report sets out some of the actions that we have been taking in order to drive that improvement. Also sets out some of the priorities that we have got going forward, and that includes focusing on those trades where we still have some level of backlog, and also developing the online repairs offer that we want to improve for residents as well, because we think that will be one of the main things that we need to do in order to take some of the pressure off the Repairs Contact Centre and thereby improve some of the call handling times for that centre. So very happy to take any questions that members may have.
Right. Any questions from members to start off with? Councillor Masters.
Yeah, I've got quite a few questions, so I'm not sure whether you want to take a number at one time or me to ask my questions one by one. I'm interested in terms of responses to members' queries. I mean, just in terms of my own personal experience, while responses might be coming through more quickly, although I'm not experiencing that either, a new phenomenon seems to be a response that doesn't actually sort of include any sort of material data. So it will say something like, the service will be visiting the block, but no dates, no timelines, even though, it's taken a while to get feedback. So I'm just wondering what standards that response has to meet to be judged to be a proper response. And the second thing is I'm just wondering in terms of the approval levels, who it is who's sort of actually being contacted about this, whether it's the resident involvement panel, a sort of new body, or whether this is something that happens automatically with everybody you're doing a repair for. And then thirdly, just in terms of the amount of time we're expecting our residents to be on the phone, is there a long-term goal for that? Because, you know, even 27 minutes, and I realise that's an improvement on 41 minutes. I mean, to me, that's totally unacceptable. And I realise that if you're calling a national utility now, you probably would be on the phone for 20 minutes or so, but that never used to be the case with Newham Council. And I really would like to think there will come a time when our residents would only be on the phone for a maximum of about 5 minutes. I'll stop
Okay.
at the moment.
So happy to answer those. So starting with the call handling times, yes, obviously the current times are way too long. So one of the priorities going forward is to reduce those, and we've got a number of things in train. So the first thing that we're doing is we're increasing the staffing levels. Because for various reasons, we often find that team is understaffed. So we're going to build in some additional staffing, and the budget for that has been approved. We are also doing some work with PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers. So the council are using them corporately to look at the way that we handle telephony generally, and that has driven some quite significant improvements corporately. So what we're now doing is looking to see what lessons can be learned from that piece of work and then applied to a service. And the third strand was the one I mentioned in my introduction, which is seeing if we can improve or significantly improve the online reporting offer at the moment. Because obviously, if we can get more tenants to report repairs online successfully, that will take pressure off the call centre. Sorry, one other piece of work that I should mention in that context is that we know that an awful lot of our calls are effectively chasers on jobs. So what we classify as failure demand. So again, if we could get some of that failure demand out of the system, that would enable us to be answering the first calls much more quickly. So we're doing some additional work to see how we can drive that out.
Through the chair, my actual question hasn't been answered, which is how far we're sort of hoping to improve that in the long term. You know, what is our long-term target for length of call time?
So we don't have it. I don't think we have a target. Cheryl, who's on screen, she's shaking her head. So no, we don't have a target at the moment, but we are looking to have significant improvement. As we develop that, maybe introducing a target might be something we look at.
And can I quickly ask another question about online reporting? Because I hear a lot of the time from residents of mine who are leaseholders that there's some particular code that they don't have. So they don't have the same ability to report online. I've heard this a number of times from a number of people. And historically, I've sort of brought it up with other senior managers within housing. That there's some particular sort of issue with the portal that if you're a leaseholder, it seems to be that much harder to report. So I'm just wondering whether that's being addressed online. And also when a resident reports something online, particularly if it's an emergency repair, what kind of online response do they get? Because I think part of the reason why they want to pick up the phone is they will have a human being on the other end who will tell them or have the ability to tell them when somebody will actually be dealing with a link that might be pouring water onto their electrics as they speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we're looking at when we develop that online offer is to make sure that if anything is an emergency, then it gets escalated within the correct time period. I don't know the full details about that restriction on leaseholders. I know that leaseholders are not able to or shouldn't be able to raise individual repairs for their own flat because that would be the leaseholder's own responsibility. They should only be allowed to raise communal repairs on the estate. So I would imagine that's what that query is about, but I'd need to look at what the current offer is and what indeed is in our plans going forward. and whether we're going to improve that for leaseholders.
Councillor Young, you wanted to make a contribution?
Can I just add into this, this area? So I think there's been a really important piece of work that's been happening through the Repairs Improvement Panel, which has made a series of recommendations, particularly about the call centre. And a number of those recommendations have been accepted. We're in discussion with that repairs panel. We met with them a couple of weeks ago, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago. So a really healthy kind of resident involvement that involves them coming in and doing visits to the centre to understand how that worked, and there are really some really practical recommendations which have been incorporated alongside that external challenge piece from PwC around that. I agree with you that it is an unacceptable length of time, and that's why the measures that are being put in place are incredibly important as we move forward. And I think your point about a target is really valid and something we should take away.
Councillor Keeling.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, are we prepared to roll out Arab's law on time and right away? And how many tenants will urgently need the repairs necessary?
So if I could answer that. So yes, we are doing a lot of preparatory work at the moment in respect of AWAB's law. We have a number of live cases. It will initially be rolled out in respect of damp and mould. So we have a number of cases at the moment where we're looking at to make sure that those cases are being handled in line with the legislation. And also for any new cases that are coming in once the legislation has come in towards the end of October, that we are then able to process them. So on the screen, we've got Darren Smith, who is our new Interim Assistant Director of Property Services. Darren, would you like to say anything more about the introduction of AWAB's law?
Yeah, I've got a team who work in compliance who are currently preparing for AWAB's law. Part of that is an IT application that surveyors will use to go out and check the damp and mould so it can be picked up and logged straight away. Regards to your question about the number of urgent repairs, we won't actually know until we start picking up AWAB's law inquiries. Based on the amount of work we've done in the last 2 to 3 years after the incident with the child, it's like AWAB, a lot of work has been done on damp and mould already, so we're not expecting to find major problems that would be decants and people having to move from properties. So we expect that most of the new repairs will be urgent, will be routine rather than urgent, but any urgents will be picked up by our internal surveying team rather than anybody external. The work might be picked up externally by a contractor, will be managed in-house directly by a specialist part of the survey team.
Thank you. I'm wondering, would you agree that it would be a priority for us as a council to create communications on specifically with the push for this new law to communicate to residents that they should be reporting their damp and mould and we should be getting it prepared for healthcare reasons? Even though we know the cost implications would be there, but of course cost over people's health. So
part of the reporting online will actually be tailored to move people into a specific damp and mould repair, so it can be triaged and dealt with separately. If somebody phones in the damp and mould repair as well, that will be triaged within the call centre, so that we track all of this. It's key that we get this right from the start of October.
Sorry, my question was more on the fact of we do a large amount of communications out to residents on billboards and PVC things on fences and wherever. I'm wondering if it's worth actually proactively saying, do you have damp and mould? Tell us, because I'm sure with the satisfaction of our council as well, it would actually increase, and we will save money in the long run on healthcare services as well.
Councillor Young.
Councillor Keeling, you're absolutely right. In proactive communication to residents, particularly about AWAB's law, damp and mould in the first instance, there will be other hazards that are considered as part of the law, is incredibly important. So there is a communications plan as part of the overall housing improvement programme, and that includes bi-monthly newsletters which go out to residents electronically. It includes posters on notice boards. The service are, as part of the preparatory work, developing a specific communications campaign around AWEB's law for residents and for other stakeholders and for councillors. So it will come up as it's on the agenda for the all members briefing coming up in early October. It's a really important part of that work. So part of that is very much about making sure that residents are aware that they are reporting early. There are some very specific timeframes within the legislation which the council will need to respond to. So in many ways, this is about directing residents to the right service so that they can get the right experience through this as the work progresses. So yes, you're absolutely right. And that's multiple forms. It's not all online, I would say.
Thank you, Councillor Young. I just think it's easier. It's best to nip it in the bud early as well on the cost of the council, and the cost of people's healthcare costs as well. My last question was, how often, once items are repaired, do the issues usually come back? Do we have any figures on that?
I can take this. We don't at the minute, but part of the process moving forward is that any repair that's complete in damp and mould, there'll be a 6-month follow-up to go out and check the property just to see if it's reoccurred, unless the customer rings in between to say it has. Part of what we do is go out and mould wash the property where the area is, so it shouldn't come back. There's usually a guarantee for sort of 2 years. But if there are certain issues around the structure of that property, coal bridging, etc., then we might have to do something further. But there is a check in place to make sure that after 6 months, nothing's come back.
And on other repairs, do we have that kind of data? Because it could be that, I don't know, there's an ongoing issue that we haven't taken into account, or possibly even the contractor is not up to scratch. I don't know.
We don't, once we've completed repair, unless it's followed up with a further inquiry, it's not something we'd go out and check again, apart from the customer survey, which is a text service. So no, there isn't a follow-up thing. What we do is if we get a consistent amount of repairs in a block of the same kind, we do track that data. So if we notice there's a number of leaks in a particular block of flats, which may or may not be something like the soil stacks, then we do a piece of work to find out why we're doing so many plumber repairs in that block or individual properties. But we don't keep a specific report that we check unless something like that comes up.
I just find it very strange that, I don't know, let's say we have one resident that has reported, I know, ceiling in bathroom leaking, and then it happens again 6 months later, and it happens again another 6 months later. Like, because there's obviously an issue that's ongoing that we're just fixing a ceiling otherwise.
That would get picked on so the second time that's reported, that would get picked to see if it's something, a leak from somewhere in the structure or another property, etc., and be resolved. We wouldn't try and leave it to a third and fourth repair. We try and solve that at source.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Aaron, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Councillor Koenig, if I can just add to this, I think there's, there is the repairs programme, which is very much a kind of responsive approach. And I think that clearly, if a resident is reporting the same issue multiple times, or if several residents in the same block are reporting the same issue multiple times, then that would lead us to want to be able to look at that. And I think there are some real challenges actually over the data maturity of what we have at the moment. And I think that's across the board. That's not just in the repairs service. And I hope that comes through in other reports. What I would say is that there's a real link between not wanting to do everything responsively. It's more expensive to do things responsively. It's particularly more expensive to do things on an emergency response basis. So as far as possible, this is very much linked to the improvement of the condition of our homes overall. And that's where the wider work beyond the repairs service around the stock condition work and understanding the nature of our properties, the capital programme works and the investment that is committed to there, that all comes into play. But I think you're making a really important point about utilising repairs data to be able to assist in that alongside the data we have from stock condition surveys, alongside structural survey work, etc. So, but yes, to my mind, it's another form of evidence, isn't it, that then can help us to make more proactive steps.
Thank you, Councillor Young.
I've got a follow-up, sorry, I've got a follow-up question to that. Often, as part of casework, we have members of the public who come to us about repairs that haven't been completed. So what are you using the casework system as part of your management information systems to work out whether they're particular problematic properties or repairs?
Not at present. That isn't part of the data that we're looking at. We're just looking at the repairs data, the stock condition data, etc. But actually, one of the things that we want to do is look at the way in which some of the complaints data might inform that. So when we're doing that, we can look at maybe bringing members' inquiry data into the fold at the same time.
I did just one more follow-up on that. Sorry, Councillor Masters. In terms of your management information systems, I would have thought a quite useful piece of information would be residents who are reporting repairs, the same repair multiple times. So do you have a suite of management information that managers can, I know there are difficulties, but you need to get a team in place that managers will be able to look at to see if there is a particular problem with particular properties or particular blocks?
So not at present, we don't, but we're looking at various options for developing our reporting suite, and that will be one of the things that we look at.
I think it's fair to say we know that data and systems and the range of data that is used remains a problematic area at the moment. We know that. That's why it's in the improvement programme. That's why the work is underway to develop those systems to get to a place of better data maturity. It is one of the key issues that has led to the C4 judgment in the first place. So we know that that's an area of weakness. There's a number of areas where we are making really good progress. This is one of the areas which is taking more time to develop, because it is important that we get this right. And it's important that we are investing in the right systems, in understanding the right data sources. Everything you're pointing to, I absolutely want to see. I want to see us being able to triangulate and look at what is the survey data telling us in terms of stock condition. I want us to look at what the repairs data is telling us, what residents are telling us, what members are telling us, what complaints are telling us. And we need to be able to look at all of those things as part of making assessments about which buildings to prioritise for investment at particular times as we start to bring homes up to decent home standards that are not there at the moment. So everything you're pointing to is absolutely right. The work that needs to happen and is happening, but is a fairly long and comprehensive programme because it needs to be, is about getting to that point of better data maturity. And we know we're not there yet.
Councillor Masters.
Thank you. I mean, I'll start by just echoing what Councillor Hudson was saying, with disappointment that issues that are occurring across blocks aren't being picked up. I know in the past I've had conversations where I've been really surprised with some of the blocks that have been targeted for secular works in my ward, when to me it felt that there were other blocks that had far more regular sort of issues. But I wanted to pick up 7.4 on page 26, workforce training. Apparently a plan is in place to ensure members of the damp and mould team have the required skills. What are they doing on our damp and mould team if they don't have the required skills? Or is it that AWAB's law has invoked a totally different approach to damp and mould to the one we were pursuing before?
Well, AWAB's law is designed to put in place a different approach to damp and mould across all landlords. So that reference is primarily about making sure that the staff understand how the processes should work and that they're able to follow the processes and understand what the legislation says. But it's also about making sure that they've got the skill sets to execute all the work that needs doing.
So what skills are we lacking at the moment?
So my main concern at the moment is in terms of understanding the process and understanding legislation and making sure that all the staff do that. but there's also the scope for looking at our policies and processes around damp and mold and making sure that all the surveyors, for example, who are doing it, are fully able to distinguish between condensation and other forms of damp. That's an example.
Right, okay. And when do you think our team will be at a stage that that's the case and they meet that standard?
Well, I hope they're most of the way there already, but over the next couple of months, we'll be rolling out some additional work to make sure that everyone is able to operate at the level we expect them to.
Okay, and can I make one more?
Yes, you certainly can.
My other question was going back to more general repairs. We've talked about call centre and about online reporting. The other tier of reporting that kind of touches on that but hasn't been mentioned yet is the housing liaison officers, which is a regular topic of complaint, not just in my ward, but kind of across the board. How do they slot into this? And is there going to be any kind of a restructure going forward? Because I think at the moment, people are finding the portal incredibly frustrating because it's not clear who has actually sort of picked up a case, who is dealing with it, who's going to give them an answer. It's just, they feel like they are sending a report into a mailbox, but they don't feel there's any accountability in the new system. And even in the old system, there was a feeling that there was no relationship with the people who were up in their block as being their housing liaison officers. They didn't see them round the block. There was no attempt to build relationships with residents or to even establish key residents within a block who could be a point of contact for ongoing issues.
So moving to the new patch system that we've got was partly designed to address that. But I think Cheryl, who's online, might be a better place to talk about that in some detail.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I'm Cheryl Russell. I am the Interim Assistant Director, Tenancy Services. I would have started my response the same as you, David. We've gone to a patch-based system now, and each resident has their own housing liaison officer. The housing liaison officers are written to every tenant, and we are now approximately just over a third of the way through our tenancy audit programme, where every household is receiving a visit from their housing liaison officer. You'll have seen in the papers that you've got for this evening, we're also carrying out a vulnerability screening programme where residents who live in particular blocks in particular orders, but in order, are being visited for an enhanced visit to check where they are with regards to their block. Do they have any vulnerabilities if we need to, for example, evacuate in case of an emergency? That programme is going really, really well, and housing officers are talking to residents in a detailed way. We are progressing at pace through that programme of all 84 of those blocks being visited as a priority. The housing liaison officers are starting a programme yet to be published, but some are a bit further advanced than others, around estate walkabouts with residents that will be, we're not there yet, but they'll be advertised and residents will be able to meet their housing liaison officer on site. And as for housing liaison officers and will there be a restructure, part of what you will have seen in the papers this time and previous updates with regards to the improvement programme is the implementation of a target operating model with housing. And one of the things that the housing management team with colleagues are now doing is looking at what does a functional service look like in Newham now, and work will start on that apace in the next few months. So residents won't see any immediate impact of that, but they will see that certainly within the medium term. So to answer your question, I think yes, but not in the restructure in the traditional way that we're used to seeing them within an authority. And relationships will be further enhanced. You'll see on the resident involvement strategy that we'll talk about in the next item, there's also area-based networks in order for housing officers to be more visible in a more strategic sense. I'll pause there, Councillor, take your question.
Can I ask two follow-ups? Firstly, I'm interested in knowing how the new patch system differs from the old system, because my understanding when housing liaison officers were introduced was that they already represented a patch that was sort of based around particular neighbourhoods. So how do the new patches differ from the old patches? And secondly, you know, I'm delighted to hear that you're assessing the vulnerability of tenants, but as I understand it, that's only in blocks of a certain height. I represent a ward that has a lot of low-rise blocks, but still has a number of very vulnerable residents sort of living within them. When are we going to get round sort of looking at those?
So I'll answer that question first, if I may. We're kind of stealing into our own thunder now for the next item, but we are carrying out as part of the wider improvement programme, a whole suite of vulnerability screening and looking at diverse needs across the borough. We're developing a strategy that strategy will be coming through, but I think by the end of the municipal year, and that addresses how we identify wider vulnerabilities. And David spoke about the systems piece. One of the system pieces that we want to enhance is our operating platform, NEC, that identifies and self-identifies to us vulnerabilities. We're introducing a vulnerability form where residents at a first point of contact, for example, if they call into us, they may want to volunteer to us what their vulnerabilities are, that we will keep on a system, therefore we identify immediately. We've got the tenancy audit programme. By the end of March 27, which seems a long way, but I don't think it's that far away, we will have visited every single property and spoken to every single household. At sign-up process now, we'll be having respectful conversations with new residents about vulnerabilities as people move around properties. So it's a piece that is moving not as fast as perhaps we'd want it, councillor, because we've got a large bandwidth of improvement here, but it is at the centre of what we're doing. The AWAB's law work, we're identifying across vulnerabilities, we're trying to identify, and then it's just within. And then going back to the patch system, I think I wasn't here at the time, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to tell you what the actual fact was, because I wasn't here, but I understand that the patch base was on a team basis. So there was a team leader with maybe half a dozen, 8 housing liaison officers that would deal with issues on a triage basis. So a resident would write into us and the next available housing officer or housing liaison officer would deal with that. We've changed it now to a proper patch base. So a named officer is responsible for a named number of addresses and the people who live in those properties.
Okay.
Can I have a quick follow-up to that? Will those names be released to councillors so they actually know?
They already have been. Yeah.
Don't recall seeing an email.
We can recirculate it.
We can do that. We can do that.
Oh. Any other questions? I've got a couple of questions. The call centre. Presumably housing has its own call centre and there is a corporate call centre. Presumably PricewaterhouseCoopers' transformation. Are there any plans to consolidate the call centres or to treat them separately at all?
Yeah, so Paul Kitson, Corporate Director, Inclusive Economy, Housing and Culture. So in the not too distant past, I think there was a centralised call centre system at Newham Council, and then probably about a year and a half, maybe 2.5 years ago, somewhere between that, before I joined, they were separated out due to a number of issues around specialisms and understanding the role of repairs, the property and so on. So a separate housing repair centre has been established. That is not performing. We've had a discussion. It's not performing in the way that we would expect it to or want it to. And I do take Councillor Master's point that certainly call time targets should be set. and then met within the right timescale. So we know that it's not performing well. We know that we've been increasing resources into that, and we know that we've been trying to improve the way that residents can get access online as well. So we're trying to make sure that we're responding to residents. We'll get to your question. The PwC work and the consultancy services they provided has increased the performance of the corporate call centre. At the moment, we haven't got a firm plan to consolidate the two, but what we are doing is sharing the learning from the corporate call centre into the specialist housing call centre as another methodology, I guess, to try and improve that and get that up to speed, because we still feel that that's probably the appropriate model to operate, because the housing service is so large in itself. But so we're trying to make sure that we're getting the specialism, separate systems, but the benefits of having shared services, shared expertise to improve the service delivery. That's the model we've got at the moment.
Right, okay. Another question. People can access repairs online. If you access online, how is it superior to actually going getting in contact via the phone? I.e., if you go online, does it get done quicker? It's about providing incentives for people, because if people believe
It wouldn't be quicker.
No,
it wouldn't be quicker.
it's quick. Sorry.
Go on.
It's quicker for the customer to log their repair.
Yes.
They don't have to get through and speak to somebody and so on and so forth. We've spoken about call handling times. So it would be quicker for the resident, the customer, to say, this is my problem. The resolution of it would probably take the same amount of time, whether it's delivered through the online methodology or the phone.
Okay.
That said, I think we're probably underutilising the online availability, and there is introduction of new tools around that. So we have to look at different experiences for our residents and how to improve that ultimately. And actually, if residents felt that their experience of reporting online meant that they didn't feel the need to pick up the phone, then actually that's part of the way we start to drive pull traffic down. But that requires effective systems, and that's why we're introduced.
Okay. Councillor Sun.
Yeah, hi. Returning to call centre and repair, I had some complaint from the residents that once they called to the call centre, after like nearly hour of waiting, call dropped, or someone answer and just call drop, and then they have to wait another like 1 hour. So the people have their life, kids, families, so they can't stay hours of waiting in the phone. And then also another resident said, reporting the online has been a bit quicker, but someone from the council, they came, like housing team, they came to see the problem at home and things, but that never been resolved actually. It's been like coming every time they report online. Someone sometime came to visit the home, but haven't been anything done actually. Sometime, in front of this kind of complaint, like as a councillor, I can't say bad toward my council with all due respect, but I don't know even how to satisfy my resident, because seeing them suffering is it's really heartbreaking, because sometimes you see they are with vulnerable household people, kids, sometimes mold issue, this, that, and I can see I actually met a few people in person or came to my surgery when actually I saw how they were suffering, and honestly sometimes feel just helpless, but still can't say anything against my council, because that would be really.
If I may, Chair,
Yes,
I absolutely hear you, and I think that is an experience that is reflected amongst a number of residents and amongst a number of councillors. I also have similar cases. I think that and all of the improvement work which is happening, and it is happening. If we start to look at the performance in terms of the particularly the out of target repairs, that is getting better. It's getting a lot better than where it was at the time of the inspection. And, you know, there's much more in place to be able to manage that more effectively now. So I'm hoping that that will mean that we will start to see a reduction in the numbers of that type of case. That said, of course, it's not good enough. And all of the improvement work is, you know, objectively, things are moving in the right direction. We start to look at and you know, we have a long way to go on this plan, but it does feel like we're starting to turn a corner on it. But if residents are not feeling that, and if residents are not experiencing that, then all the numbers in the world are not going to change that. And that's the bit that we are that will change, because those numbers and how that starts to shift will start to shift residents' experience of what is happening. So I completely appreciate we're not there yet, but it is absolutely the direction of travel we're going in.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this particular paper? I've got certain observations. The first observation is the expectation that the executive ought to be setting meaningful targets.
Yes, I agree.
Now, I would have thought where that will be done will be as part of the corporate plan, and my expectation would be that the mayor, in discussions with members of the executive, will have a series of targets for those members of the executive, and those targets will be communicated to executive directors and senior managers, and there will be an element of monitoring against those targets. That'll be number one. I think number two, the thing that strikes me is the suite of management information that you have to actually work out exactly what is failing. So a number of questions have occurred from members of scrutiny about repeat repairs. And then I would have thought there are other housing organisations which have suites of management information, and maybe there's an element of learning that can be done from those other organisations. Are there any other areas that we would like to make particular recommendations? If you can see Councillor Masters.
I think the point you made around actually monitoring what's going on with individual blocks across caseworks, a very good one.
And I've got the expectation that we will be looking at this one. Thank you very much for this paper. It has been incredibly informative for us. And I think I've moved those observations. Can I have a seconder for those? Thank you very much, Councillor Masters, and thank you very much for your report. Now we come on to item 7.
I don't know if now would be an appropriate time for you to go back and review the things now that you've got.
No, I do
that at the end.
I'll do that at the end. That'll be the easiest thing, yeah. Right, I come down to item 7, regulator of social housing. This report outlines the current position regarding work in progress, including a review of the implementation of the recommendation and a summary of actions and progress in the year since the C4 grading, including key metrics, building and electrical safety. This report also highlights how Newham Council is making good progress since previous updates concerning the regulator of social housing, RSH C4 grading. This commission is scrutinising this report ahead of going to Cabinet on Tuesday the 16th of September 2025. I appreciate the collaboration between the executive and scrutiny to provide us with early sight of draft documents. I also mentioned the able and pragmatic assistance of our council officers. There were some challenges, in part related to the sequencing of publication, and we encourage residents and other interested parties to view the Cabinet meeting next week, and in addition to the proceedings this evening. Again, a great thank to you, Paul, and to all the officers. I do apologise for the lateness of the papers, but I thought it was in the interest of transparency about scrutiny looking at this C4 report as early as possible.
Chair, thank you for that. And I take responsibility for the late publishing of the papers too, and I'm pleased that we're able to hold a discussion this evening despite that as well. So thank you.
Right, thank you. I would like to invite Councillor Blossom Young and Paul Kitson to provide a short introduction or conceptualisation comments about the paper. Who's kicking off?
I'll start. Thank you very much, Chair, and I appreciate the collaboration of colleagues and officers, particularly in making sure that this is available and that we can have this important discussion. I really welcome the pre-scrutiny nature of this in advance of cabinet considerations next week. So this report is really about updating colleagues on the progress that the service is making since the judgment was received in October 2024. And clearly that C4 judgment was a really unacceptable position, unacceptable for our residents, unacceptable in the way that the service was being delivered at the time. And I really want to thank officers for all of their real diligence in the progress that is being made. There's a number of important areas of work, particularly around electrical safety, particularly around repairs, as we've just been discussing. And there are a number of really substantive points that were picked up by the regulator that are being addressed and are starting to be addressed. But I think the other real element that the regulator was picking up on was about some of the systematic issues happening in the service that really required addressing. And some of those are much more substantive changes and pieces which need work. And much of that work is taking place, but it is a huge programme. And by necessity, I think there's a lot around kind of prioritising what work needs to take place, both in terms of addressing the key issues, but also about setting up the service in a way which is fit for the future and which is going to deliver for our residents. And I'm really pleased with the work that the service has done to do that. And that's really been set out in the Housing Services Improvement Programme, which we launched in May. And it's really about delivery against that. So, colleagues will talk through the detail and aware that the report will have been read. I did want to draw particular attention to the work on the resident involvement strategy that's been taking place over the last few months, and really pleased that we have what we think is a final strategy, which will go to Cabinet for consideration next week. And that's been a really important process about putting tenants and leaseholders' voices at the real centre of this work and around really involving residents much more fully than previously in shaping what they want their involvement to look like in the service moving forward. And the report also contains the complaints report, which we're required to provide to the Housing Ombudsman, which also I would draw colleagues' attention to. But look, there's a long way to go in this work, but real progress is being made, and I'm really pleased that that's the case. So thank you to colleagues for making that happen.
Right.
So, you've introduced the paper perfectly. I think just to extend, whilst you're in the period of sort of thanking people, I think our residents have been very patient with us over the past 12 months. We've enjoyed strong engagement in the call them roadshows or the drop-ins that we've had with residents in a number of different centres across the borough. And they've been very clear about what their expectations are of us. They've been keen to join our resident challenge board. They've been keen to be involved in the resident involvement strategy. And so that's really welcome. So thank you to all the residents that have been engaged in that. And I think the partnership across the council, actually, between members and officers has given us a really strong foundation for this plan. But as Councillor Young says, we're really just at the foothills of it. We're just short of a year in. We started and have addressed the serious safety and quality issues. We've managed to work to make sure that residents are safe through our mitigation plans and strategies, but we have a lot more work to do to make sure that all of that is complete and then it's sustained. And if I sort of articulate the consumer standards in an overly simplistic way, they sort of ask, do landlords know who their residents are and everything about them? And do they know everything about the properties that they sit in? And that's the mission we're on. It makes it sound very simple. We're making strides towards understanding both the resident perspective through some of the initiatives that Cheryl outlined earlier on, and a lot of the work that you'll see in the paper around stock condition survey, for example, our repairs programme, plan maintenance and so on, is understanding our properties. But there's further work to do. And the target operating model that Cheryl has introduced there is the vehicle, the mechanism by which we really evaluate across the whole service, what are the systems, what's the technology, what are the processes and the structures, ways of working that will make sure that residents have their properties maintained to a good standard, get their questions answered and get the kind of customer service they should expect for many years to come. So we've done a lot of work across the first 12 months. The next 12 months is going to be much more about setting the service up ready for the longer term. And that's what the regulator expects us to do. They don't expect us just to fix things. They expect to fix the foundations of things properly so that people have sustained good service in the future. So there's a lot in the paper. So I look forward to the debate we have now.
Any member? Councillor Masters.
I'd like to pick up on the resident involvement strategy. I feel we're very good as a council, and obviously, you know, health and social care is my usual kind of playpen at coming up with strategies, but not always so good when it comes to delivering. How are you going to hold this to account over time? This isn't the first attempt we've had at sort of involving residents in housing services.
That's right. It's not the first resident involvement strategy the council's had, so let's not pretend that it's a completely new thing. But it was several years old and needed both a refresh and it needed to address the consumer standards. I think Councillor Young might talk in more detail about the strategy. But the strategy fundamentally talks about the different ways that we engage, inform and involve residents, whether it's at the formulation of ideas, receiving feedback, or sitting around in decision-making groups. And we think the new resident involvement strategy goes much deeper than the old one in terms of engaging residents and involving residents. But you're right, we have to back it up with then feet on the ground, officers on the ground to make sure that we're constantly reinvigorating that, because one of the reasons you need to go through the process again after 4 or 5 years is residents tend to lose interest and so on and so forth, and then you need to kind of go through the process to engage new residents to join you in running a service. And I think that's where the target operating model comes in, you know. So do we get the right approach to housing officers across the piece? Do we get the right model for our repairs teams across the piece? Does everybody that's engaged in housing services have vested interest? Are they compelled as well to put residents first? And if we get that culture right, as we go through that target operating model, then we'll achieve what we need to achieve. Because I think what you're hinting at is a strategy is just a strategy. It needs to really be embedded in the culture of a team. That's exactly what we're trying to do here.
Do you think, because I attended one of those forums and spoke to some of the people who are going on to the panel, and when you're looking at the feedback you had on the strategy, I think quite a lot of their voices are actually captured in the responses. At what stage do you think you'll be able to go back to them and say, okay, you convinced now, and they will be saying, yes, you know what, I was cynical about this whole process, but actually I've seen a real change in my estate, in the information that's coming to me, in the professionalism of the service when a repair is needed my estate, on dealing with ASB on our estates. When do you think the residents who are on that panel will be turning around and saying, yes, hold our hands up, you've convinced us?
So I think one of the really key features of the involvement strategy is that it's not focused on one panel. So actually this is about engaging a wider group of residents and about thinking about different mechanisms for involvement. So a lot of the feedback we received through, and I'm not sure which, are you referring to the Housing Forum?
Yes, at East Ham, because there were members of the resident panel who attended that last week of our local team.
So let me talk about the strategy and then about the resident challenge board specifically. So the what residents have been telling us in the preparation of the strategy is about different ways of engaging, not always about panels, not always about sitting in meetings, and not always about looking at things on a borough-wide basis. So actually a lot of residents have said, you know what's most important to me is what is going on in my home and what is going on in my block and what is going on in my estate. So the bulk of the strategy is actually about how do we facilitate involvement activity at that level, which I was referred earlier to, and I will want to come in on this, as that's really been leading this piece of work. How do we make sure that that happens at the place where residents are? So things like the estate inspections, walkabouts, being able to bring services together with residents, with councillors, to look at what is happening in an estate, problem solve it together, get action happening, start to see those results that are, pretty abstracting, I would say. There are some statutory requirements which mean that we need to consider things at a borough-wide level. So there is a specific requirement for the building safety regulator around resident involvement in building safety. So there will be a specific group set up to look at that. Similarly, we think there is a real role for resident involvement in holding the housing service to account. So there will be a specific panel or group for that. There is an existing resident challenge board, and that's been established, which is overseeing the improvement programme. So that's really around resident voice in the improvements that the housing service are making. So that's a really important group also. But I think the thrust of the strategy is really about saying, this isn't about residents having not many opportunities really to engage with the service. So how do we start to build in more flexibility to mean that things can be much more immediate, but also that residents can continue to, I don't want to use the word scrutiny, but there is something about resident scrutiny of the work that the housing services is doing, which is not replicating this group, of course, but is about having resident involvement in looking in a different way. But it's actually, there's much more which is about real practicality. So it's as much about that culture that Paul was describing around how residents are treated, actually, how they're treated when they are on the phone, what their experience, when are they cut off, how do we start to change that? And that's a number of different measures. So that's absolutely about the movement to a patch-based system for housing liaison officers. I'm trying to get to the answer to your question, but I think it's worth contextualising that I don't think this is about one thing. I think it's about a range of different things which need to happen and which are happening. The thing I would really reference in terms of when will residents start to see a difference to this, I would draw your attention to the tenant satisfaction measures that were published in June and are referenced in this paper. So these are annual measures which are reported to the housing regulator. Every single landlord across the country does those. And 12, I think, of those measures are direct resident feedback. And what we have seen is a real uptick in the performance for 23, 24 to 24, 25. Now, there's a lot of caveats around that, but I think that that's as good an indicator as any that residents are starting to see a shift. We're not there yet. But I think there is something around, people will experience different things at different times.
Just one more question, and I think.
Yeah, I just need to sort of follow up what you're saying about the resident approval ratings. Is this a consistent group of residents, or is this every resident who has an interaction for service being given the opportunity to log their feeling about the quality of their experience? Is it like one of those smiley face things where you've got a smiley face at one end of the scale and then a very angry face at the other end?
So different things. So there is responsive feedback from residents. So a repair happens, then I think it's not everyone, it's a text, isn't it? So residents will get a text and are invited to provide feedback. The tenant satisfaction measures are something different. So they are kind of carried out by an independent company that Newham commissions. It's important that this is not done by Newham directly. Over the past 2 years, they've been carried out as face-to-face surveys. So it is sampling. So it's not every resident, but it's certainly over 1,000 residents, I believe.
How do they find them then? How do they identify them?
Okay.
Okay, so they randomly,
Not randomly.
yes, but I'm just trying to get clarity on who these people are and whether there's consistency, because if you've got 1,000 different
So it's weighted so that they achieve the representative sample of the different typologies of council housing. So direct tenants, direct leaseholders, and it's proportioned out. Okay, it's done.
Councillor Keeling.
Yeah, my question was actually just on what we're actually talking about, and how, if we are going to do another tenant satisfaction survey, is really 1,051 enough responses, even if they are weighted? I find when we weight things, and I'm sure my colleagues will understand this from political data as well, we do definitely miss things, especially if there's a real mix of concerns in an area. I just don't think, and I think with the worry of the rating that was given, would it not have been better to contact more to get precise data? Because it doesn't seem very reflective, as it was very positive.
Yeah, Councillor, if I may, I will bring in colleagues to answer the technical point here, but this is not the only data point. So the tenant satisfaction measures are one of the measures, and it's the largest of those measures. They're one. So this is not the only opportunity that residents have. That's partly why we have a resident involvement strategy and an action plan for how that will be put in place.
But in all great respects, this is the report that we are publishing, which has a weighted, good, positive outlook on us. So, like, whereas I'm sure through all the other methods that we are engaging with residents, we're getting a lot more negative feedback, but this is the one that we are putting outwards as an outwards comms, which doesn't actually show the actual factual nature of it all.
If I may, Councillor Keeling, so the tenant satisfaction measure process is something, the scope of which needs to meet the satisfaction of the RSH. So it's a mandatory process we need to go through. While I understand the point of your question around the validity, 1,000 people out of 16,000 will, I am sure, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to do the work, have become a statistically significant number. The nature of the questions, the data needs to be consistent from one year to another. So we record those. We deliberately have somebody externally to do it, to validate it, to give us some external assurance. That's one thing. You're quite right, though. And what we're not doing is sitting looking at the tenant satisfaction measures and thinking, doesn't everything look good? We've gone in the right direction. Everybody must be happy. That's far from what we're doing. And in fact, in the paper we've got in front of us, we're also including, for example, some fairly stark information about the number of complaints we receive. So I think Councillor Young's point is right, and something that David and I talk about a lot, is we must always take multiple reference points to understand whether the service is performing well. And I'd like to assure you that we don't suffer from optimism bias in that regard at all, quite the opposite. We're always looking for the problems to solve, because that's the mission that we're on around housing services improvement. So tenant satisfaction measures we must publish. We're obliged to do that. We must do that externally. There must be a valid set of work. Additionally, today we're talking about our complaints, which is obviously a less favourable set of issues. Another reference point, obviously, then is a resident challenge board. Another reference point would be the tenancy audits that are undertaken, for example, the road shows and other more local meetings. And the business, I suppose, we're in Councillor Keeling is trying to agglomerate all of that information to understand exactly where the service is at. And we'll only be happy when the complaints is down to a manageable level. They're all being organised in time. TSMs are acceptable. We're receiving generally positive noises from the resident challenge board on a consistent basis, and we're able to respond to people's small and serious issues really quickly. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there, I think. But hopefully, I think we're being much more transparent than you might be saying. And just in this paper alone, Councillor Keeling, I think about some of the problems we've got.
I do have questions on other items, but I don't know if anybody's got anything that they wish to.
We'll do another round. Anyone else have got any other questions? Okay, councillor Keeling, you can answer a couple more questions, okay?
Thank you. Can I ask how often councillors are invited for a ward walk around with I don't know, caretakers, residents, council officers to be able to push to get things fixed?
Councillor Keeling, I would say that that does not happen as frequently as it should, and that's why it's a really core part of the resident involvement strategy moving forward. And that's partly why there's a deliberate focus in that strategy about tackling and working with residents and with councillors on an estate-based level to be able to do exactly that. It doesn't happen as much as it should, and that's absolutely why it's in the strategy.
I only say this as we are the eyes of the wards usually, and we know how to point things out a lot quicker.
100%.
I move to Councillor Masters.
I wanted to pick this up more from a strategic point of view, that personally, I have been invited on a number of sort of walkabouts in my ward. So it's not that I feel is missing. It's more the kind of strategic sit down, looking at the ward as a whole and picking out which estates are good ones, because I often get housing coming to me and saying, we're doing a walkabout on this estate in your ward. You know, it'd be great if councillors could join. Whereas I'd quite like to say, well, actually, we've done quite a lot of work on that estate, but there are other estates which we were door knocking recently, and every single property had an issue with damp, or, you know, these estates are looking like they could do with a bit more love, and also particularly green space, because that seems to be an area that seems to be being left out of the equation, but where, you know, it might be a lack of resource and capacity, but there do seem to be real issues.
I think you make a really good point, and actually councillor insight alongside other data points in determining where the focus should be in each ward seems really sensible to me. And I think the other thing that I'm very keen to see moving forward with this is that it's also about a joined up council approach. So, you know, we're well aware that not everything is solved from a housing perspective. It's a really important component. But as you say, green space, that ASB is part of that. You know, that there's a whole nature of issues that happen at a very neighbourhood level and drilled down to an estate base level. So no, I agree. Actually, I think there is something about how do we utilise councillor insight as part of determining where to focus.
I've got a question, and it's really about the resident involvement strategy and the performance indicators and outputs, because the key thing is we all want it to be successful, but have you got a suite of indicators to say whether it is actually successful or not? I mean, I've seen some of the things like officers attending meetings. I wouldn't say is an indicator of you know, something working successfully. So I can understand if we do this and we do a tenant survey, random sample, and you answer particular questions, and then you can see by asking those questions whether people are particularly satisfied with the service and the strategy and whether things are working. And you can see year by year whether it's working.
Absolutely. And I think that, I mean, we have set out what I think are the kind of indicators of this and the metrics of that. I mean, I am very interested in impact, actually. And I think the metrics for measurement as set out are the indicators of impact. So the regulator's guidance is incredibly clear that what they are interested in terms of resident involvement is not about the number of meetings, it's not about the number of residents who turn up to things, it's not about the number of officers that those are indicators along the way. What they are interested in, and what I am interested in, is how does resident involvement affect change? How does it affect change in the service? How is the service then responding to resident views and resident ideas? Now, you need some measures to be able to kind of show you the indication of that. But I think it's not, numbers are not the only things at all. And I think it's much more about how do we see genuine involvement in resident involvement in shaping the service moving forward. These, I think, as we start to embed the strategy, I think there's some tightening up to do around these. And I think that's very much something that we can take away and do.
Any other questions?
Councillor Keeling.
Belen.
I have two last ones, if I may. One is a possible recommendation that would it be worth, especially with the fire issues that came out of the report, is it possible that we could maybe upskill our current brilliant caretakers that look after our estates, and possibly they inspect the fire regulations within those areas? They know the estates very well. Whether it's possible within the workload, obviously, and of course, as long as they're compensated by being upscaled. That's my first item.
So upskilling the caretakers isn't something we've looked at, but what we have done is we have involved the concierge staff, especially in relation to our high-rise blocks. So quite a lot of the fire safety duties that we've got are now covered by the concierges.
Okay, I was thinking on more of the lower estates. So we're looking at 4 levels, or maybe even three levels of housing, with stairwells in the middle, kind of thing. But my last item was what environmental implications are being considered with the improvements that are going to be made.
Councillor Keeling, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
You were breaking up, Councillor Keeling. Couldn't hear you.
So
repeat it again.
What environmental implications are being considered with the improvements that are going to be made?
Can I start with that? And I'd actually just like to come back on your previous point about caretakers. So I think you make a really good point. And actually one of the other things that is happening is the housing liaison officers are tasked when they're visiting blocks to carry out spot checking. So there's very much kind of different tiers of that fire safety bits, but they'll be looking out for things like obstacles in corridors and that kind of thing. But a really important point about how do we utilise all of our housing colleagues around that. In terms of environmental considerations, much of the improvement programme is about understanding, as Paul was describing, understanding the people in our blocks and understanding our blocks and our properties. And part of understanding our blocks and our properties will be leading to a number of different capital programmes to make improvements. We're working really closely with the climate action team and with Jacob around that, and actually have been successful in securing some warm homes funding under the current wave of that grant funding. That will particularly be going into retrofitting existing properties in a number of different areas and tackling actually some of our homes which are most affected by damp and mould. So back to the point about AWAB's law, part of the way that you start to address damp and mould issues is by making sure that the blocks are working in the way that they should in relation to ventilation and so on. So I think there's a big programme of capital works as part of this, and I think and obviously housing construction. So we're not even talking about construction, but but energy performance is important. What materiality we use is important. And I think, you know, in many ways, this is about where we can retrofitting in a way which is really supportive of that. But it's also about how we carry out the rest of our capital works programme and working in a way which is beneficial for the environment. And in part, that's about our residents, and it's about the impact that they see. So warmer homes, more energy efficient homes, reduction in bills, impact on fuel poverty is all part of that mix. And that's about the choices that we make in the capital programme moving forward.
And what percentage of homes have you got covered with this capital programme for retrofitting?
So the specific warm homes programme is around 300 homes, I believe. More, slightly more. Cheryl wants to come in.
No.
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to come on this point, councillor, sorry.
Oh, I see, okay.
Is it 300 with or without the waiting?
Councillor, I think I will confirm the number for you. It's over 300, but that's in terms of the warm homes programme.
Okay.
There is a much wider capital programme, and in part that is dependent on the stock condition work that is being carried out at the moment. So we need to understand what each of our buildings are doing in terms of their performance to understand the retrofit measures that are needed to bring them up to standard. So it will differ for each block. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that at the moment. There are a number of things that we are doing that will improve the environmental performance of blocks. So, for example, there are a number of external cladding blocks that we've got to do. So obviously, whatever cladding we are now putting on blocks, not only will that be to current standards in terms of flammability, but also that will be to current standards in terms of thermal efficiency as well.
I just find that we have a real opportunity here to make out of this report in a climate emergency. Well, we're being forced to make the repairs and forced to make the improvements. And if we can tackle the climate emergency at the exact same time, it just seems like killing two birds with one stone kind of thing.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you for your answers.
I've got a couple of questions. The first question is on the housing resident improvement strategy 2025 to 2030. I've seen that if you used co-create and they sampled 100 responses. I've got very limited knowledge of stats, but how do we know that these people were randomly selected? And by the nature of using co-create, you're going to get a skewed analysis. So, i.e., the 100 responses will not be in a normal distribution.
So can I describe the process that we've been through for involving residents in shaping the strategy? So
I have asked a specific question, and it is in your.
I'm answering it.
Yeah.
So co-create. So New and Co-create is the platform that the council uses for a number of its consultation. It is self-selecting in terms of which residents choose to access it. There were 3 stages of resident involvement in the strategy. So the first was using co-create, and that was around specific consultation on the outline principles for the strategy. So 10 principles were put forward and residents were feeding back on their views on those. We then moved to workshop stages, and so workshops happened in May. There was an online workshop and an in-person workshop in Stratford as part of that. And then there was the kind of consultation period on the draft strategy after those elements had been created. So I'm not sure I understand the question. So residents will have self-selected to give their views on that. What I would say is that the promotion of that survey was really targeted towards our tenants and leaseholders, because that is who we want to hear from. in that strategy development. We also ran drop-ins in libraries over the period that survey was open.
Right, the question I'm asking is that, the reason why I'm asking the question is that you're trying to use statistical data and you're saying that you've got certain results. And I'm just questioning the validity of your statistical analysis. That's.
I'm not, well,
Yeah,
Cheryl, would you like to come in? Because you've.
I think we're all going to say the same thing. We're not trying to use statistical data to interpret or validate the strategy. We are giving information around how many people were involved in the development of the strategy. The number could have been any number, as Councillor Young said. It was open to any qualifying tenant or leaseholder. So that's anybody who's a tenant and a leaseholder. And the numbers that you're looking in there are those who chose to take part.
So thank you, Cheryl. So I suppose another way of viewing this is we're keen to refresh our resident involvement strategy. We're using best practice as a guideline, using national bodies to advise us, in the regulatory consumer standards to inform us. We're using our own professional judgment. But what we've done through this particular process is central to then shaping it and making it relevant to Newham. And in my experience, actually have 100 people that were prepared to step forward to be engaged in, a more in-depth process of how would you like to even shape a strategy. So this is definitely about involving people, not just telling people or saying, how bad is your repair? This is about saying, how would you like us to work together? That's quite, that can be quite challenging to engage people in that, as you know, from forming committees and groups in anything in a voluntary way. So actually 100 people have stepped forward to help to shape that and to make sure it's relevant to Newham. So I tend to look at it perhaps a little more favourably, that number, than maybe you are, Chair. I think that's quite a lot of people to be engaged in the formation of a strategy for resident involvement, bearing in mind all of those other reference points that we're using to make sure that the strategy is fit for purpose and frankly doing the best we can to engage with our residents.
Right. Any other questions? Just looking around. Complaints. I suppose the issue, there is an issue with complaints across, not only in housing, but the whole of Newham. So I suppose the first question that I have is, there is another report which will be going through to audit and governance. My understanding is that there was a letter sent to the chief exec and a reply wasn't sent, but there is an issue with complaints. I'm just trying to tie in the response that we've got here from the housing ombudsman with the other one. So has there been any discussion about the complaints process and the ombudsman in local government and social care at the corporate management team level?
Yes, it's really important to us as a corporate management team as a whole. So we regularly, most weeks, we'll talk about the complaints situation across the council. We'll look at data which shows us which directorates have which number of complaints answered within time or out of time. Particular concern as a whole for the council are the overdue complaints within the housing service. So yes, we have been discussing it with the chief executive, with my peers around that table. And then David and Cheryl and I, of course, along with some of our corporate colleagues that run our corporate centres handling complaints, have been developing an action plan to try and reduce that number of overdue complaints down. It's really important for us to get that number down. And
are the housing complaints dealt with by housing, or that all complaints dealt centrally?
Housing complaints are dealt with by a team within the housing service, and there are a number of key dedicated staff to triaging and managing the complaints process.
Okay.
For housing complaints, they'll need to then involve lots of people within the service, usually management, the service, to get the technical or other data in order to actually to form a substantive response to that.
Right. And final question, in terms of, presumably there are target times for resolution of these items, who sets the target times and who monitors them?
Sorry, Paul.
No, please, Cheryl, please.
From a housing ombudsman perspective, councillor, the targets are set by the ombudsman. So we have certain periods of time in which we have to reply. We keep a record of these via the system. So we know every single day we're using a Power BI information report that tells us where we are with the those in target, those out of target. And as you'll have seen in the report, we have to report at the end of each year, we report to the Ombudsman on that performance. On the back of what Paul has just mentioned with regards to the action planning, we are working really, really hard now. And members, Councillor Masters, you started this meeting today explaining your own experience of not having the service that you want, and we know other members and residents feel the same. What you probably aren't seeing yet, but is beginning to translate through the improvements that we've put in place, is there's a reduction day on day now. We are biting into the numbers of complaints that we have overdue. They've gone down quite considerably over a period of time. Not where we want them to be, but we've got, as Paul says, the action plan, and it is beginning to turn this around. It's more of a tanker than a yacht, but actually I would say that I am encouraged by what we're seeing over recent weeks.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Right. The first thing, as I said earlier, I do welcome the officer's contribution and your contribution in getting this report through to overview and scrutiny, and the problems that Cabinet were looking at this report next week, and our meeting was this week. And I welcome your efforts, and I think we've had an incredibly productive discussion about this item. I think the direction of travel is good. I think I think we will all agree that there's still a fair amount that we have to do. And I am hoping that when you report again to Cabinet and to scrutiny, that we see continuous improvement within these areas. Any other comments from members?
I think it's coming back to the point I made at the beginning, that I think I've gone from having very comprehensive members' responses to now having very late responses that actually contain very little substance at all. And that I'm finding incredibly frustrating.
Right, so
We take that back.
Thank you.
We will.
So I'm just going through the skimming for the report. Sorry for being a little bit slow, but I'm looking at page 23 around equalities implication. We talk about that we will be looking at equality impact assessments that will be produced. Could you elaborate a little bit on that point? When you talk about equality impact assessment, you're talking about in your future development of future policies or process. Give me some clarity on that point.
It's included in the appendix. So should we get to it? Let me just scroll down to find it.
so actually it was
Undertaken by Emma, wasn't it? I saw that.
It is.
Sorry,
I don't know.
No, not at all. No, not at all.
I did see it.
Page 91.
Yeah.
Page 91.
Page 91. So this is the equalities impact assessment on the resident involvement strategy.
Just involving residents.
So particularly, so the equalities impact assessment is carried out whenever there's development of a new strategy or something particularly new in the services being.
Can I follow up?
Yeah, very quickly. Yeah.
How about would this equality impact assessment extend to going into housing planning or planning process when it comes to big developments, taking into the demographics and the different aspects of the development involving the demographic especially?
Sure. So I don't want to comment on the delivery of new housing. That is within the scope of the discussion today. It's within a different portfolio area, which I think this committee is considering at a different point in time. What I would say on a housing perspective, or in terms of the housing improvement work that we're doing, so particularly where there's development of a new thing, then we will absolutely carry out an equalities impact assessment, which is about understanding a range of different demographics and
Community
a range,
spaces.
exactly all of that. What I would say is there are a couple of particular pieces of work going on within the service. So Cheryl's referred to it earlier, but the vulnerability screening work, which is taking place primarily around our fire safety work and responses, is about identifying and working with residents who are maybe compromised in some way in the event of a fire. So it's about making sure that they are able to evacuate buildings.
Are they going to disable individuals?
Exactly. But could be a range of.
Well, sorry, Chair. That's a great start, but I would envision moving forward that we extend this equality impact assessment beyond that, and maybe as a housing lead, you might want to take that away.
These are carried out for any new service area across the council. So.
Councillor?
Yeah.
In terms of new developments, I would have thought your questions will be better directed at those individuals who sit on strategic development and planning, and as part of the discussions about the local plan, which I know that you have raised previously.
Seriously, and I was just thinking, I mean, where does the policy, I know the strategic development was a judicial body, they'll be doing their bit, but somewhere in the council, someone's responsible for that area. Now, if it's not housing, it might be planning, I'm guessing.
I suspect the direction that you'll be looking at will be planning.
Happy to have a conversation outside of the meeting if you'd like to.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Right. I did sum up, so have you got sufficient? I'm just looking for you, Artemis, that you got sufficient on my summing up. So therefore, given my summing up, I moved the rest, the observations that I made in my summing up. Do I have a seconder for that?
Second.
I've got 3 people who have seconded that. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got some other small items that we're going to do with your minutes. So if people wish to leave, they can leave. I've seen people shutting their computers and virtually sprinting out the room.
I'm happy to.
Now, shall we move back to, I think the only item we've got to do.
Programme and the minutes.
Work programme in the minutes.
Did you confirm the items for the next meeting?
In terms, I thought we got an agreement about the items on the work programme, but we were incorrect.
Yes.
So we're going back to the work programme and I'm asking. I am asking if people have got any questions about items on the work programme. At the next meeting, one of the key items that we will be discussing will be temporary accommodation and issues around that. And so members may be particularly minded to come to that to ask questions about that. Are there any other issues around the work programme that people have? Or do we take that as being agreed? I'm looking to members, I've seen silence. We said that's been agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
And new housing delivery. Did you do that already?
Now, new housing delivery, is that
For
on?
November as well.
All right. Right, yes. Yep, new housing delivery. I assume that'd be one for you, Paul.
Yes, on the next meeting.
The next meeting, that is the 25th of November.
Yep.
Okay. That's agreed. And then the next only remaining item are agreement of the minutes. Do we take the minutes of the meeting on the 6th of May to be agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Any other business for members? Thank you very much. Thank you for your participation and thank you for your patience about dealing with all the issues about getting papers to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the recording, state the time that you're closing.
I'm closing the meeting at 20:37.